The deputy's hand had already moved to his duty belt when Regina Ashcroft pointed directly at me and declared, "That's him. He's a man trespassing on HOA property." I looked at her, then at the deputy's badge, then back at the woman standing there in her signature deep red blazer. I answered with the only words that actually mattered, "I'm not a member." She gave me a confident smile, the kind someone wears when they believe the outcome is already decided. "My name is Silas Vantry, and I own 840 acres bordering Ashwood Ridge, a gated subdivision built about 12 years ago on land my grandfather sold off piece by piece back when he still believed people honored a handshake. I kept the back 40 for myself, including the creek, the old barn, and the gravel road that now cuts through what the HOA proudly calls its common area. I never signed their covenants. I never paid their dues, and I never volunteered to be governed by a board of people who arrived decades after my family had already spent 3 generations farming that soil. None of that mattered to Regina Ashcroft. What mattered to her was authority. The trouble began with a letter delivered in a cream-colored envelope sealed with gold. The words Ashwood Ridge Homeowners Association stamped across the front as though they carried unquestionable power. Inside was a violation notice. According to them, my gravel road, the same one my grandfather carved out by hand in 1961, was now an unauthorized access route supposedly encroaching onto HOA common property. Their demand was simple: remove it, pave it according to their specifications, or install a gate secure with a lock controlled exclusively by the association. I couldn't help laughing. I stood in my own kitchen holding that letter from people who had occupied my family's land for barely more than a decade, acting as though history started the day they arrived. That same afternoon, I drove to the subdivision. Regina was waiting outside the clubhouse, wearing the same red blazer. She seemed to treat like an official uniform. I explained the facts as plainly as possible. "That road existed long before your association," I said. "It isn't on HOA land, and more importantly, I'm not a member. I never signed your documents, and I never intend to." "It doesn't matter," she replied. "Your property falls inside our jurisdiction. The board voted unanimously. Your boundaries were drawn around land my family already owned," I answered. That was the moment she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Remember that moment, because before everything was over, that phone call would become one of the biggest mistakes she ever made. 19 minutes later, 2 Sheriff's Patrol vehicles rolled onto the property. Regina immediately accused me of trespassing and claimed I was developing association land without permission. The younger deputy looked uncertain from the beginning, while the older one simply asked to see my paperwork. I handed him my deed. He studied it once, then read it again before looking up. "Sir, could you step over here for a minute?" For the first time since this whole mess began, I watched Regina's confident smile begin to disappear. There was something I hadn't mentioned to anyone, not even my attorney. 3 months earlier, after my grandfather passed away, I had been cleaning out the old barn when I discovered a hidden safe built into one of the walls. I never knew it existed. Inside was a single weathered folder tied together with faded twine. Across the front, written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "Ashwood Ground Lease. Do not forget." Until that afternoon, I had never bothered opening it. There simply hadn't been a reason. But standing there on that gravel road with 2 deputies and an HOA president convinced she had already beaten me, I realized that reason had finally arrived. The senior deputy stepped away and made several phone calls. First to dispatch, then to the county assessor's office. When he returned, everything about his attitude had changed. "Ma'am," he said to Regina, "according to the county plat maps, this gentleman's property line extends through part of your clubhouse parking lot. I have no authority to remove someone from land that may legally belong to him." Regina's face instantly turned nearly the same shade as the blazer she always wore. But she still wasn't willing to admit defeat. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived in my mailbox. The HOA board claimed they were placing a lien against my property for years of unpaid association assessments, even though I had never been subject to their rules. Regina didn't stop there. She posted about me in the neighborhood Facebook group, calling me a squatter. She accused me of manipulating legal documents just to avoid paying HOA dues. Within 6 hours, more than 40 people I had never met were demanding that my land be seized. That was the moment I finally untied the old folder. Inside was a ground lease drafted in 1994 between my grandfather and the original developer who created Ashwood Ridge. The man who originally built the clubhouse where Regina proudly held her monthly board meetings had signed a very unusual agreement with my grandfather. The document covered the exact half-acre parcel beneath that building, and it wasn't a sale at all. It was a 989-year renewable ground lease. The reason was simple. The developer had run out of money before the final property transfer could ever be completed. Bankruptcy stopped the sale before the deed changed hands. My grandfather had never sold that piece of land. He had only leased it. That meant that, according to the county's official records, the ground beneath their clubhouse, their boardroom, their offices, and the very building where Regina had voted to find me had legally remained in my family's ownership the entire time. The next morning, I contacted a real estate attorney. Within 48 hours, the county recorder confirmed exactly what the old documents showed. I wasn't simply someone who didn't belong to the HOA. Technically, I was the landlord of the land their clubhouse occupied. So I mailed the board a single letter in return. There was no expensive envelope, no gold seal, and no attempt to make it look intimidating. Just a straightforward letter on plain white paper. It informed the Ashwood Ridge Board that, as the lawful lessor of the clubhouse parcel, I was requiring a new lease agreement for their continued use of the property. Effective immediately, any future occupancy of the building would have to be negotiated directly with me. Regina Ashcroft stepped down from the HOA board before the month was over. The last I heard, she had moved several neighborhoods away. Ironically, she chose another community with an HOA. This time, she actually signed up to be a member. The lien they had placed against my property disappeared within a week. It was followed by an apology letter so carefully drafted that it was obvious several attorneys had reviewed every single sentence before it was mailed. I never raised a lease payment just to settle a score. Instead, I negotiated fair terms, documented everything properly, and made certain no future landowner would ever have to fight the same unnecessary battle over property that had been in a family's hands for generations. Because, in the end, none of this was really about a gravel road. It wasn't about a parking lot, and it certainly wasn't about Regina's red blazer. It was about people claiming authority. They were never legally given over land they never truly understood. So I'll leave you with one final thought. Before accepting someone's claim about what you owe, why you owe it, or whether they actually have authority over your property, take the time to read the documents for yourself. Sometimes a single piece of evidence that changes everything has been sitting quietly in an old locked box for years, simply waiting for the day someone finally opens it. Have you ever discovered that you had far more legal rights or leverage than anyone wanted you to believe? I'd love to hear your story. And before you go, let me know where you're watching from by dropping your country in the comments below.